Hello, welcome. Everybody here, hello.
Hello.
All right, last session of the day, need some energy. We got jet lag. You know, you don't want us to fall asleep up here, so you got to give it up today.
We're the ones with the jet lag, so I think we need them to help us not fall asleep.
Exactly. Okay, great. So howdy, I'm Jeffrey Snover, Distinguished Engineer and Lead Architect for Windows Server, and with me is Superstar
Erin Chappell, and I am a Group Program Manager in the Windows Server team.
And so today we're going to talk to you about Windows Server 2012 and its multi-machine management capabilities. Lots of great stuff. We got a lot of content today, so we're going to go pretty quick. Okay, so first it's important to set the context for what we're going to show you. In the past, this is by far the most important, most impactful, most transformative release of Windows Server we've ever had. Not just because of the transformations we've had in virtualization, in networking, and management, but really a change in identity. You see, in the past, we always viewed ourselves as being an operating system for a particular server and its devices. But with this release, that transforms, that changes. And we now see ourselves as becoming a great OS for lots of servers and the devices that connect those servers, whether they're physical or virtual, on-premises or off-premises. We are a cloud OS, and this is a very large increase in the scope and responsibility of what we have to do, and it changes the way we have to do things. And so you're going to see that throughout today. And so this breaks down into, the management requirements for a cloud OS are very different, similar but very different than the requirements of a server OS. And so they break down into standards-based management, robust automation, and multi-machine experience. And so that's what we're going to show you today.
All right, thanks, Jeffrey. So I'm going to start off and talk you through some of the investments we've made in standards-based management. Can I just get a show of hands? How many people were at Jeffrey's keynote session this morning on modernizing the data center? Awesome.
How many liked it? Oh, the hands went down.
They don't have
No. You don't have to fill out the evals if you didn't like it.
So what we're going to try and do in this session is to do a bit of a double click into some of the things that Jeffrey introduced this morning. So let's start off talking through standards-based management. So Jeffrey talked this morning about the data center how, and this concept of how we need to do the same thing that was done in the computer industry that has made Windows successful in our partnership with the hardware ecosystem, how we need to do that similar thing within the data center. And this really, we think, solves what internally, or kind of affectionately, we refer to as the N-by-N problem. So you folks probably are familiar with this. You have many resources that you need to manage in your environment. You manage the disk, you manage storage, you manage Exchange, and they all have a different way in which you need to manage them. They all expose different interfaces, they have different ways in which you interact with them, different ways in which you script them, and this creates just a complexity in the system because the IT pro or the developer has to track all of those different ways of managing those resources and how to interact with them, whether or not you're managing it as an IT pro or whether or not you're a developer who's actually writing a tool to manage that environment.
The other name we have for this is the mess.
So it's the spider web of management. And so the direction that we believe and that we are pursuing is one where we add this layer of abstraction. That, for us, is the Windows Management Framework. And the Windows Management Framework provides a common way in which you describe, in which you access, and interact with those managed resources. Now, we could do that in a number of different ways. We could choose our own proprietary way of interacting with or describing those end resources. We don't think that's a good idea. We really think we need to embrace the world of standards and standards-based management. So what you will see is that WMF includes a model layer, which for us is SIM, and we talked this morning about OMI and what we're doing around releasing a lightweight version of a SIMOM into the industry that allows us to manage non-Windows devices. We also have models around storage. The industry standard there is SMIS, and we've made major investments in this release in the area of storage and storage management. We then have the protocol, or the way you access that end device, which is WS management, standards-based again. And in this release, we've actually created new OData access to the machine through REST protocol, HTTP, and then PowerShell remoting. And then we have a standard API in which you use to interact with and build tools on top or program against those managed objects. We've introduced a new managed client in this release. Again, you can use PowerShell as an API. And OData as well.
In fact, that MI client is part of our donation to the open group, so that indeed, whether you're writing a Windows management application or a Linux management application, you can use exactly the same API.
So what have we done in this release with WMF as well as the underlying technologies that compose WMF? Well, the first and foremost thing that we've done is to radically simplify and lower the cost of instrumenting Windows. How many of you have ever tried to write a WMI v1 provider? All right, I'm sorry. But, you know, it was just a really complicated experience, which is probably the reason why most of the hands in the room didn't go up. In this release, it's dramatically simplified. We worked with a networking team in this release who actually exposed all of their instrumentation through WMI. And, you know, when they first contacted us, they were like, no way, I'm not going to do it. But we actually realized that they looked at it, and what used to take many weeks was down to a matter of days.
Yeah, they said it was an order of magnitude easier to write this. So good stuff. We got it right.
So we really want to invest in people who want to provide WMI providers to provide that rich instrumentation. And then one of the challenges in the past is you had WMI providers and then you had PowerShell commandlets, and never the two shall meet. Well, in this release, people who deliver WMI providers, there's actually an easy way for them to expose them as PowerShell commandlets, which Jeffrey will show you a little later, that makes us complete that ecosystem of PowerShell commandlets. What this enables in terms of us building on top of a common standard SIM WMI is it allows both Windows clients to manage non-Windows devices, but vice versa, it allows non-Windows clients to manage Windows devices, and Jeffrey's going to show you that in just a minute. Important thing to note in this release, because we believe that people should be managing the server from a client machine, not from the server itself, we have enabled remoting by default. So WSMan is enabled by default to eliminate that initial step of having to configure your server to be remote managed. We've also made investments, as I said, in SMIS, such that within Windows you can now manage SMIS-based storage as an integral part of the storage management experience. And then last but not least, the WMF is not just a Windows Server 2012 thing. We know that you have heterogeneous Windows systems in your environment, and that you're going to need to manage not just Windows Server 2012, but also Windows Server 2008, 2008 R2, and on the client side, Windows 7. And so the Windows Management Framework is available down level to those releases so that you can take advantage of all the new functionality in PowerShell, WMI, WS Management on those older systems. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeffrey to do a demo of standards-based management.
Hoo-ha, lucky me. All right, so first I'm going to show you our new commandlets. Okay, so we have get command.
You are not projecting.
I'm not projecting. I'll project. Oh, you meant there. Okay, so behold the SIM commandlets. Now, in the past, you saw WMI commandlets. These are SIM commandlets. They're very similar, but they're different. WMI was very early implementation of the standards, and in fact, the standards had moved on. And so now we've upgraded WMI. We now have the latest schemas and the correct semantics, and we have a correlated set of commandlets that work against them. Big difference is WMI works only against DCOM, and these SIM commandlets, by default, work over WSMan or DCOM. So that means both. You'll be able to manage all your Windows machines current and down level, and these very same commandlets will work against heterogeneous devices. So for instance, that Arista or Cisco switch, you'll be able to use these commandlets for them. And here you're showing the basic SIM operations. And now we say get SIM class minus class name disk. And what this is showing you is it's very easy to now find all the information in your environment through wildcarding and things like that. You can also go say, hey, show me all the classes that begin with Win32 that have some method name that starts with term. Oop. And so there's one, Win32 process has a terminate method. I can find all the classes that have a particular property, handle, and I can find all the classes that are of a type association. Okay, so now it makes it very easy to find information in SIM. Now here, I'm going to get Win32 processes, and I'm going to assign it to a variable, $x and $y, and notice that the object itself contains all the information about the class. So if I type just $x, I see the object, but if I say $x.sim class, I find all the information about the object. So what are all its properties, what are all its methods, etc. And we've gone and made each one of these SIM objects have a very nice toString. So it's very easy to understand what it is. You got a Win32 process, its name, and its unique key values. So it's very easy to work with. So here we do get SIM instance, Win32 computer system, and what I'm highlighting here is that you can work against multiple machines. Work against multiple machines. Here it's all the same machine, but I'm going to do it 3 times. Okay? And so it's getting this information, and it's failing. That's okay. Anyway, the key thing I want to highlight is that these commandlets are all multi-machine commandlets, okay? So you can say, I'd like to perform this operation on 1 machine or thousands of machines. We have, you can operate on them individually, or you can create sessions to them. So this is the commandlets to create a session, get the session, remove the session. And we'll try and create some sessions. And what is doing? It's failing. We're not going to get, it's not selling. Okay, well, we're going to show you that later on. But anyway, the key things I want to point out here are, here's how you specify SIM options with the protocol of DCOM. So exactly all the commandlets I was showing will work against WSMan, or you can specify DCOM. And what I want to highlight here is that in Windows, in PowerShell version 3, we have workflow support. And this workflow support has direct special casing for SIM operations. And so they happen in a very scalable, very performant way. And so here I'm showing an example. This here is a workflow to get inventory. And what it's showing you is classes against a large set of SIM classes, and we've got this for each parallel. And so what that'll do is it'll go get those SIM classes against multiple machines in parallel. So it's very easy to get inventory information against a large set of machines, against a large set of SIM classes, very, very easily. So sorry the previous command didn't work, but we're going to move on because we got a ton of things to show you.
You're going over here, Jeffrey.
Is that right, or we got more slides?
Nope, it's all you.
Oh, sorry.
It's your favorite demo part, Jeffrey.
This is my favorite demo.
He's so excited he can't remember what he needs to do.
This demo sends me, I just love this demo. Okay, so here we see Server Manager, and you see the roles, right? So it's showing you, it's got file and storage services, yeah? Great stuff. Now, put your seatbelts on. Seatbelts on? Okay. Here, behold, a blacked out Linux box. All right. So this is a Linux box, right? Linux box, and I'm going to run a Python script to go enumerate the roles on that Windows box. Okay? Yeah. Come on. This is awesome.
It's exciting stuff.
This is what standards-based management means. So I'm on a Linux box. I point to a remote Windows box, and I'm able to enumerate the roles. But wait. It gets better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to point at that remote Windows box, and I'm going to point to a VHD on that remote Windows box, and I'm going to say, hey, go get that and give me the roles in it. So now we're talking standards-based management to a Windows machine. That Windows machine points at a VHD. We're mounting that VHD using offline provider to go in and get the roles. And obviously this is taking a bit of time. But then, ba-doom, those are the roles installed in a VHD of a VM that's not running. Is that crazy? I just love that stuff. But wait, it gets better. So check this out. So why would we do a get? Let's do an install. Okay? And this script is in fact designed to install the fax server. Okay? So now, from a Linux machine, I'm installing Windows Server roles, okay, using standards-based management. And now we've installed it. And if I go over here, let's see, I get out of this, and I do a refresh cycle. Now, it turns out that when you install the fax machine, it has a dependency on file and print. And so you see, we have both the fax server and the print server. All done using standards-based management. Linux can now manage Windows. So, and earlier today, we showed how Windows could manage Arista switches and Cisco switches. So this is the promise of standards-based management. This is the foundation upon which we will build the data center HAL to give you maximal choice. Just have it work simplicity for your entire data center.
Great. Thanks, Jeffrey. Lost my clicker. All right, so we're going to get to touch the surface of a set of areas that we've invested in Windows Server 2012. And so after each section, there are further drill down sections the rest of the week on each of these areas. If it's something that you're interested in, that you use on a regular basis, I would encourage you to check out these sessions. We've got lots of great speakers here this week, lots of great demos. So on Wednesday, you can learn more about what we're doing in standards-based management at WSV 308. So let's move on to robust automation. So when we started the Windows Server 2012 release, we'd been on a bit of a journey with PowerShell and moving into the world of automation. And we decided to take a step back and take a look at where we saw the world evolving. And one of the things that really stood out was that we see the world being intrinsically messy. It's just complicated. Right? There's a lack of consistency across the systems you have out there. The reliability between those systems isn't always what you would expect it to be. And then we see innovation moving forward, and that changing the rate of adoption and how you need to deploy new machines, which means you're perpetually going to be in this world that is messy. You're going to have different systems that you need to manage. Additionally, we see that the scale, as you move to the cloud, as we look at virtualization, we look at what that does to density and how many VMs you can install on a machine, that scale introduces complexity that also is a driver for automation. And ultimately, what you want to do is to create a solution that matches the needs that you have in your environment. We're going to deliver tools that come with Windows Server. Other vendors are going to deliver tools, but they won't always match what you want to do within your environment. And having that flexibility and that ability to customize and produce tools in-house is really important. That allows you to do that ad hoc type management that we all know exists. So this is really a huge driver for automation. Automation is how we think you deal with that messy world because it helps you produce reliable, repeatable, consistent ways to manage your environment. And so, we have been on this journey with PowerShell. In V1, we introduced PowerShell, and it had approximately 100 commandlets. We built out the language, we built out the engine. It provided basic access to WMI objects, but we knew that wasn't enough. V2 was a big investment for us. We added in remoting, we added in the ability to do jobs and background jobs. We provided the integrated scripting environment to you to be able to have a graphical way to create scripts and run scripts in your environment. And that was a pretty huge release for us. I mean, I think when we did that release, I stood back and went, wow, I'm not sure how we delivered this much functionality in one turn of the server. But I will tell you, in PowerShell 3, we've far exceeded what I thought the capabilities of the team were. We've invested in 4 major areas. The first is around making PowerShell simple and easy to use. How many folks in the room use PowerShell today? Hey, great, over half it looks like. You know, one of the things that we've heard from you is that learning curve is not as straightforward as one might like it to be. And so we've made a lot of enhancements in the integrated scripting environment, added IntelliSense, simplified the syntax, added show command to really help that adoption and learning of PowerShell.
That's going to help all the people that aren't you.
You know,
all the
it's
people
funny.
that are learning it for the first time.
Don Jones actually says it's going to help reduce your work because more people won't be coming to you and asking you for help, and they'll be able to figure it out themselves. The second area is around coverage. We have over 2,400 commandlets that are shipping in the RC version of the product, and really that feeds the community. We have a great community that supports PowerShell, and we also kind of listen to that community, so I encourage you to become an active member if you're really looking at PowerShell as something you use on a day-to-day basis. I talked about dealing with a messy world. We've added in support for robust connections so that if the network is a little flaky and you lose your session, that you can disconnect and reconnect. We've added in workflow, which Jeffrey talked about. And then your favorite one is the job. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, sure. So we had jobs in version 2, but in this release we bet big on jobs. And so jobs are essentially the ability to say, hey, I'd like to perform an operation and just do it in the background. I don't want to like wait around to doing it. And so you can do that both with workflow, you can do it with WMI, you can do it ubiquitously with PowerShell. And now in this release, we also support job scheduler integrations or task schedule integration. So you can go and you say, hey, I'd like to perform this operation every Tuesday or every Friday night or whenever some event happens. So what that means is you can automate your systems and you can be at home playing with your kids, out playing soccer or watching a movie, and the system's all doing this for you. And unlike Task Scheduler of the past, here you can do it and the output of the script is saved so you can get it back. In the past, that was difficult to do.
Yeah, great. And one of the promises that we like to make with PowerShell is that if you start to make the investment, we just make your investment grow over time. So all of the scripting that you did in PowerShell 2.0, you can bring forward into PowerShell 3.0. You can now leverage it in the scheduled tasks and jobs and really start building out what you can do with the power of automation. Lastly, V3 is a better V2. How many folks know about our Connect site? If you don't, awesome. If you don't know about it, you go out to Connect, and there's a PowerShell section in the Connect site. We monitor and listen to the feedback, and I actually think this slide is out of date. When I talk at TechEd North America, Travis, one of the program managers, called out and he says, it's over 200. So we've fixed over 200 issues that were reported by folks like you through the Connect site. So it is a direct communication channel to us. If you have pet peeves about PowerShell, if there's something that's not working, go out, log a Connect issue. People can vote on it. We take a look at it. We really listen seriously to that.
We love complaints. Every complaint is an opportunity to make the product better. Look, we like it when you say nice things about our product, but as Bill Gates used to say, positive feedback is not actionable. Negative feedback is. That's why he used to beat us up all the time.
Great. And then just to really show you the amount of investment we've made in PowerShell 3.0. I don't expect you to read this whole slide, but this is a list of all of the features that we've added in PowerShell 3.0. I suspect if you are using it today, you will look at that list and there will be a half a dozen up there where you will just want to applaud that, hey, they've done something with that. So, great investment. So with that, let's take a look at some of the new features in PowerShell 3.0.
All right. First,
they love PowerShell too.
okay, now that's the gauntlet, all right? Are we going to let that? Okay, we can do better than them. First, what I'm going to show is the commandlet from before. I had provisioned a new laptop and I had not turned on remoting. Someone pointed that out. So I turned on remoting, and here's that commandlet I mentioned before, get sim instance.
That is actually a really important thing. We have enabled remoting by default on the server, but not on the client.
Yes,
so
very important distinction. Okay, so there it really works, trust me. Okay, so now, simple and easy. So here we do get module, and here are all the modules that we're shipping now. App Blocker, DISM, DNS Client, iSCSI, WSMan, networking, tons of storage, just tons of commandlets, over 2,400 commandlets, okay? Now, why do we have this? And the answer is, we're trying to achieve a world where you can think about what you want, type it, and get it. And in the previous release, there were 230 things that you could think, type, and get. And now, there are 2,400 things you can think, type, get, right? And the difference is vast, right? So in the past, if you couldn't do that, what was the answer? And the answer was, well, that's okay, we're a scripting language. So you can use WMI, you can call COM, you can call .NET. Pretty complicated stuff, right? Advanced scripter stuff. And sometimes it was great because we had some real advanced scripters out there who love that stuff, and then they would take it and produce high-level task-oriented abstractions for the rest of us. But that's no longer required in a lot of cases because now it's there. So this think, type, get world. Imagine I wanted to get a new SMB share. Like, how might I do that? Maybe I type new SMB share. Oh, and look, it sees what I'm trying to do. I click on that, and then, well, what? Well, I'd like it to be a particular path, C:temp, and I want it to have a name. Oh, name, temp, and I'd like to give full access to ntdev jsnover, and voila. You think about what you want, you type it, and you get it. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Now, we've also simplified the where and the for each. Anybody who's worked with PowerShell, I guarantee, has seen the following. This is our constant thing. We say get process, pipe 2, where, dot. Oh, by the way, did you notice this? Check this out. IntelliSense on the where. Is that crazy? Because this is smart enough to know that get process is going to return process objects, so it knows that these are the properties on that. So what you do is where handle count, and look, check this out. Here are the operators. Okay. By the way, we got some new ones in there. So greater than equal, greater than 900. Right? And so this is a common thing we would do all the time. And it's probably one of the first things anybody learning PowerShell learns, okay? Because where is very, very important, okay? But there's a certain group of people that look at that and see the $, underbar, and their head explodes. It's like, what's a $, underbar? And the answer is it's kind of a geeky thing, but we made it now easier. Now we've replaced that, and you can say $PS item. Okay? And so now that reads a little more natural to most people, most beginners, okay? But still, squiggle brackets. What the heck is a squiggle bracket? Now look, to be successful with PowerShell, you got to learn what a squiggle bracket is. But not necessarily on your first day. So for simplified where, you can just get rid of the squiggle brackets and get rid of this $ item. So you can say get process pipe to where handle count greater than 900, and it just works. Okay? So it's much simplified. Yeah. So now let's do this. Let's create a couple calcs, because you can't have enough calculators. Okay, so we'll create 3 instances of get calc. And now, where did I go here? Okay, there. Now I say get process, and imagine I wanted to get the names. Well, you could do select name, but notice, oops, sorry, calc, or if I wanted the ID. But notice what it's actually doing is it's creating an object with a property. If I just wanted the IDs itself, what you had to do was the following. For each, $ underbar, now you can do PS item, dot ID. Okay? And there, that's the way you had to get the IDs. But we've simplified it. By the way, internally, we called this the war on scripting. In our scripting language, we have a war on scripting. What's that about? The answer is we want to just make it simpler. So, again, the squiggle brackets, let's get rid of those. And you can just say for each ID and get the objects. Okay? So, very nice. By the way, this also works with methods. So down here, you see my calculators, right down there in the tray. But if I do this and I say kill, notice they're all gone. So be careful. Okay, so simplified where and for each. Next, we have the new ISE. You've been seeing that. It's glorious. It's powerful. And one of my favorite features is this show command. Okay, so the show command shows me, shows me all the commands that I have. Okay, so I can go down and take a look at all the commands, or I can say, hey, well, what was that thing around, what was it? Well, process. And it shows me all my things, right? So I can say get process, and it shows you, so is this is like the definition of irony, a GUI to a command line interface. But it's very powerful. So notice that get process, there's 3 ways to get process. You can get it by name, you can get it by ID, or you can get it by input object. So by name, right, we can go and say, well, what is the name? And I can say *SS, and then you can run it here. Okay, great. By the way, have you ever noticed, did you know that get process, you can ask for file version information? You may not have noticed this. Show command makes things like that very obvious. So here I just click that, and I run it, and it's showing me the file version information for the processes running all the commands that end with LSS. So show command, very powerful stuff. Next, IntelliSense.
Oh, wait, but my favorite feature about that
is
I'm writing a script, and so I can run it, but I can also, is my mouse?
It occasionally works.
All right, okay, I'll use the thing. Oh, copy. I can actually copy it.
Oh, yes, of course.
And then if I create, I'll just go down to the end of your little thing. Can I do it down here?
You can.
And enter, and I paste it. Oh, should work. Let's paste it here.
Here, we do.
You do it. Obviously, I can't, and I don't know how my favorite feature works.
Oh, you know what? It's a different keyboard.
It's a different keyboard. I was hitting the function thing.
Yeah.
So, but you can copy and paste it in, which makes it really easy to go find what you need to do, create the right command, and then move it into your script and build your script up from there.
Yeah, and so now once you're in IntelliSense, all sorts of wonderful things happen, right? Set execution policy, right? Notice it pops up and it shows me the full details of the command. I say tab, tab execution policy, then space, and look, it even has tab completion or IntelliSense for the values of enums. So I can go here and I can say remote sign minus force. Okay? So very easy to now produce the scripts. Now, I don't know about you, but here, I got a little confession to make, right? You might know I've been working with PowerShell for a little while, but still there are parts of the syntax that I find difficult to remember. In particular, for some reason, the switch syntax, I just have a hard time remembering, okay? So if you ever have anything like that, we now have snippets. So this is Control-J, and these are the snippets you have. And so you can go here and say, oh, I'd like to have a complete commandlet, and it fills in all the information for that commandlet. Okay? So it shows you the help. By the way, that's the other thing I can never remember. I can never remember the names for comment-based help. Well, there they are, and I just go in and I replace the values with my values. And here in the process statement, I can go and I can say, hey, I'm going to do something with the switch here. So again, Control J, come down here, select switch, and there's the syntax for the switch. So now I don't have to remember, right? I can now use this and make it easy to insert and get going.
And the great thing about snippets is that they aren't just limited to what we ship in the box. They're actually extensible. So you can create your own snippets, add them into the snippet library, and then they'll show up in your environment. So common things that you do all the time, you can now have at Control J at your fingertips.
Party, party. And, of course, regions. I don't know if you see these little boxes here, but look here. As I put my cursor over it, it highlights the region, and I can click and whoop, 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 whoop. So this is just awesome stuff.
You won't get the cool sound effects in your own office.
No, you can. You just got to work at it. I can come to your office and do it for you if you'd like. So lots of fun. And lastly, I know everyone here who raised their hand, having learned PowerShell, has encountered the one seam we have in the language, and that's this difference between when something returns one thing versus multiple things. So you know this as hey, I'd like to do, well here, I've got a script. Okay, this script says, I want to get an ID, and I pass in a name. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a get process with the name, and it's going to be X, and then I'm going to give it the ID. Okay, so I run this, and I say get ID minus name LSASS. Okay, and I get the ID, yeah? But what happened if I type star? Right? It's going to get process for it's going to give me all the processes, and then that collection doesn't have an ID, so it's going to fail. And so that's the issue, that sometimes commandlets turn one thing and sometimes they return a collection. Now the traditional way that you've had to deal with that is you coded it this way. You said, hey, I want to put this, always force it to be a collection, and always index it into the first one. So now, if I do this, I get 1, and if I do that, I get 1, okay, because I grabbed the first one. So you have to cast things. So that was a seam, and honestly, it was an ugly seam, and we fixed it. So now, like ampersand $, really, no. So get rid of this, okay, and get rid of this, and so back to the original script, and now if I do, if I do this, it works for 1, but watch what happens when I do wildcard. It gives me a collection. So the dot now acts as an array operator, and it gives me that full collection of properties, okay? But wait, it gets better. So imagine I do $x equals GPS LSASS, right? $x dot get type, right? So this is a process object. It's a process object. It's not a collection. It's a process object. But check this out. $x, a 0.id. So you can treat individual items as arrays of one thing. So now the syntax papers over a traditional seam, making it much easier to learn PowerShell. So
awesome. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
So if you've been using PowerShell for a while, you want to see even richer functionality of what we've done in PowerShell 3.0. Mir and Dan from the program management team are doing WSV 414, which is advanced automation using PowerShell 3.0. They will walk you through, I think, like 10 of those 100 and some odd features that were on that slide earlier, but they will go into them in depth, and they really are the top 10 features that we really think people will start using immediately with the new version of PowerShell. So with that, I'm actually going to hand off to you, Jeffrey.
What a deal. It's my privilege to be able to talk to you about our multi-machine management experience. Let's swap. Okay, so here's the thing. We talk about PowerShell, and a lot of people misinterpret that and think that we're walking away from the GUI. Nothing could be farther from the truth. We have invested massively in the GUI. However, we invested in the GUI in a smart way, a GUI that layers on top of PowerShell and standards-based management. So everything you do in the GUI, you can also do in an automated fashion, right? Again, because you want to be out playing with your kids versus sitting there hitting the mouse. But we got a rich new GUI. We invested heavily. You'll see it's just glorious. I just love it, right? We focused in on design, okay? Design, pride and craftsmanship. You take a look at it, it's glanceable, which is to say you look and you immediately know, hey, is there something that requires my attention or can I focus somewhere else? You don't have to go drilling into various things to find out whether you should spending your time there. It's relevant. It's showing the information that you need to solve particular types of problems, and it's actionable. When you see an issue that needs to be addressed, you can address it right then and there as opposed to having to navigate around to find out how to address a problem. Now, remoting is the default, right? So we encourage you to run the GUI from, we love GUIs, we just don't like them on servers. Now, why don't we like them on servers? And the answer is we're trying to get to a world where the server only has the information, only has the code required to run your application. Because any code that's on the server that's not directly running your application is a liability. It consumes resources, it is a security exposure, and most importantly, it can be patched. And if it's patched, it can be, cause a reboot. We find that when people get to server core, you have up to 50 to 70% fewer critical patches. So that's why we're hardcore on this. Love GUIs? Not on servers. Run them on the client and do remote management. We also have remote management through the browser. So you can bring up a browser and remotely manage machines. And we've drive through this consistency between the GUI and the command line, so that everything you do in the GUI you can do through the command line, between the workloads, so that the way, having learned how to manage RDS, it should be similar to the way you manage file servers, so you can leverage those skills. And then across configurations, whether it's server with a GUI, the new name for full server, server with a GUI, server core, or the minimal shell. Okay, so again, we wanted to have a solution that could span multiple technologies for managing multiple technologies that span multiple servers. So what's that mean? That means you want to be able to have aggregation and drill down either by a technology, and by that I say file server. I want to manage file server, or now I'd like to manage RDS. And when I do that, I want to see everything associated with RDS, or I want to see everything associated with file server, or by server. Like, no, ignore those things. I want to focus in on this server, show me everything about that server, okay? So with that, Aaron's going to show us the amazing, glorious new server management. I just love that thing.
All right. So here I have Server Manager, the new dashboard view of our multi-machine console. The first thing I'm going to do is actually, the welcome tile is really meant to be the initial experience when you load Server Manager for the first time and what do I do with this? Oh, I've got to add in servers, I've got to install rules. Well, I'll be your guide today, so I'm just going to, I'm going to hide that right now. It is accessible again through the view menu. If you want to go back. I know some people, if you're like me, I won't check that never show me again because I'm like, I'm never sure where I'm going to get it, so oh, yeah. I like to point out where it is, and so you'll be free to free up the real estate. So as Jeffrey said, one of the things that's really important to us in this release is that we want to make a dashboard that is glanceable, that is actionable, and that contains relevant information. Now, how did we come up with those things? Well, if we really step back, there's a huge movement in the company to move to more of a metro style, metro principles, and embrace those principles, right? A lot of that has been done in the consumer space. What we did is we looked at those principles, things like pride and craftsmanship, things like being fast and fluid, and we looked at how they apply within the context of managing servers, of the IT pro environment. And really that came down to making sure that we provided a UI that, again, is glanceable, that's actionable, and that's relevant. So what do I...
And beautiful.
And beautiful. So what do I mean by that? You know, I have here in my environment, I can see quickly, I have 7 servers that are installed in my environment. I've got 6 roles that are installed across that. We have these tiles that have grouped the information by role so that you can see how is DHCP doing in my environment, how's DNS doing, how's IIS. At first glance, you're going to see that that console looks a little unhealthy. It looks a little red. And so we're trying to direct you to what action should you take in order to get your environment back to a healthy state. So I'm actually going to start up here with this little notifications tile. One of the things that you have in a multi-machine console is that you'll have tasks that are running in the background. And you'll finish adding a role, for example. You'll click close, and it'll go off and be doing that deployment in the background. This notification section is where we provide you with updated status on tasks that have completed or not completed. In this case, I'm going to take a look at what's there. And I actually have this issue that the automatic refresh has failed. I have some post-deployment configuration I need to do. But let me take a look at the task details, because I actually think this automatic refresh failed for a number of reasons. The BPA results are there. But actually, let me look at an older one. The BPA is there. All right, it's actually not showing. I might have gotten the latest information. What I wanted to show you here, I'm going to click out, is that within Server Manager, I can not only manage Windows Server 2012 machines, but if I go to the All Servers view, you see that I actually have a couple of machines in the environment, one running Windows Server 2008, one running Windows Server 2008 R2. So Server Manager isn't only contained to managing Windows Server 2012. I can take that WMF, that Windows Management Framework that I talked about, deploy it to my down-level servers, and then I can manage them from within Server Manager. So you can create one view. We don't get all the information, which is usually why we have an automatic refresh error, that it can't get the performance counter. That's one of the things that we don't collect, but we collect service and event information from those down-level machines. Let me go back to my dashboard and start working through some of the issues. So first on the DHCP, I have, looks like 4 critical events that are here. So yep, I can see I've got 4 critical events. What we've done is worked with the various role teams to really make sure that we are presenting with you the information we think is critical. But we know, going back to that relevant, that you're going to want to customize the information that you see. So here, in this case, we're showing critical events.
By the way, it's worth noticing. So in the context of DHCP, there were 4 critical events. So she just clicked on that, and it brought this up showing just the DHCP events and just the critical DHCP events. So you don't have to go filtering all that for yourself. We do that for you.
So if I come to this view and I say, hey, I actually don't have enough information to figure out if these events are a problem or not, I can actually drop down the severity level, click all, because I want to bring in error and warning, and you'll see that I now have all the error and warning events in there in that view. So I can start to do some troubleshooting right in line, really taking action. Let's say that I get to that point where, you know, I figured out what's happening, so I'm going to go back. I'm just going to show those error events. And, you know, it's not an issue. I can hide those alerts from that period of time so that I can just dismiss them out of the view of the console. Or I can do this. Let's just say I don't ever care to see this 1041 ever again.
This is crazy.
I can do things like minus 1041, and then it removes it from the entire view, and I won't be bothered by that event moving forward. So again, we do our best to default to what we think that you will want to view, but we allow you to customize it to your environment, because we know you don't want to wake up and come in the morning and have a red dashboard and it all be things that you already knew about, or things that were okay in your environment.
Yeah, so if you just put in that ID, you'd only see that ID, and if you put a negative sign in front of it, it hides that one. How cool is that?
So I'm going to click OK. So now I can see I've cleaned up my events. We're going to move on to the BPA results. So here on DNS, I actually have run a BPA, and there aren't any critical issues with it. So But say somebody calls me and they're having an issue, they don't know if they can connect, their names aren't resolving on their network. I could actually, right from within the console, go in and say, I want to see all the BPA results. And it'll, again, bring in the warning, the informational ones. So allowing you to tailor, maybe you have a server that's really important, and it's not just the critical things you want to see, you want to see everything. Then you can use this as a way to do that. I'm going to deselect that because I don't want my dashboard to be super red. And we'll click OK. So last thing, I think Rick showed this morning, but I have a couple of services that are stopped. So I'm going to open that up. And you can see I've got the print spooler stopped on my 2 print machines. Right from within the console, I can right-click. It's going to go off. It's going to start those services. And I'm getting better and better and closer to an environment that is green and doesn't have any issues. Okay.
Gotta love that.
So, one of the things that's really interesting, we know that, again, in the terms of that relevant and making sure the console is really customized for you, one of the things that you can do is we group by role by default, and we also give you this all servers tile in case there are any servers that might not have a role installed on them. But we know that's not always going to fit your environment. Maybe you have servers in different geographies, maybe you have servers in different departments, and you want to view those servers as one entity. So what we allow you to do is to go in and create your own server group. So let me call this the Seattle servers, and let's say I know that server 4, server 1.
You realize we're in Europe.
Yeah?
Should pick like Paris.
Paris or something like that? All right. I got Seattle on the brain. Okay. So I'm going to add in 4, 1, and 3. I think they're in Seattle. Click OK, and you'll see a tile comes up, and it pulls in. Again, it's reporting BPA, events, services on those servers. And you also see on the left-hand side, I get a new navigation link where I can click, and it'll then show me those 3 servers. Right? Show me the drill down information around those servers. If I multi-select in this UI, you'll see that below the events are changing. Now I'm at 73, I was at 45. It actually scopes the bottom. So if I deselect that, I'm just getting the events and the services scoped to those 2 servers. Again, really helpful for troubleshooting. If you're in an environment and you want to compare what's going on against 2 different machines, you can multi-select and view what's going on. One of the benefits of Server Manager and having a consistent UI across these various different views is that the rich filtering and query capability that we have in this list control is available everywhere within Server Manager. So let me just give you an example here. If I go down to the roles and features, maybe I want to see is PowerShell installed on those machines. What is there? That allows me to kind of scope the list of features to just
And so when you just type in that field.
I just type that in and it's filtered.
Yeah, on any field. So if PowerShell's in any field, it'll show it.
Exactly. And I can do things like save this as a query. Maybe I want this to be my PowerShell query. Click Save, and then in the future, I can come back and easily switch between those views, have those views pre-saved within my environment. And it's not just limited to just filtering. If I click this little down arrow on the right, I can actually add criteria. So here, I want to add criteria that PowerShell, and maybe I want it to be, I want to see in the path, I want to see if ISE is there. You can build up these rich queries and save them so that as you navigate through the environment, you've got the right views to access the data in your environment.
And so these are like SQL queries against the table and any table within Server Manager.
Very cool. Okay, so I've talked a little bit at the high level of just basic Server Manager functionality. One of the things that we did in this release was we worked with 3 teams in particular, the File and Storage Services team, the Remote Desktop Services team, and the IP Address Management team to rebuild their UI and integrate it directly into Server Manager. And when we were doing that, there were 2 scenarios that we really focused on. One was a task-driven approach. So I have a task that I know I want to perform. how do you guide me through that experience? And the other pivot was around troubleshooting. And I'd like to show you this in the context of the file and storage services. So I'm going to click on the file and storage services link. You'll see that that pane retracted to the left so that I have more real estate to focus on storage management. And here what I'm going to do is go through the process of taking disk that is attached to a server and actually making it available on the network by creating a pool, creating a virtual disk, and then assigning it a drive letter. Can
you tell Aaron's starting to flag? We're going to need some energy from you.
I need some applause. Oh, look at that. All right. So we're going to get...
That was pity applause. Wait till she's going to earn it in a second here.
Just wait. Okay, so I'm going to go through this to the task of creating a storage pool first. Here you can see that I have sort of unassigned disk space on my server demo 3. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go through and create a new storage pool. Brings up an easy to use wizard. Walk through. I'll give it a name, test pool. I can pick the disks. So it gives me the disks that are unallocated. I can pick the disks. We'll pick all of them for now.
Ooh.
Click next. I get a confirmation, and I'm going to go and create that. Now, we know I created this pool, but it's not very useful unless I actually create a virtual disk and then assign it a drive lever. I've got a pool, but who's going to be able to access it? And so we automatically guide you to the next step in this process. So if I click create a virtual disk, when this wizard closes, I click close, it'll launch the next stage of that process for me, that next stage of that task. So here I'm going to go through, I'm going to quickly, my test pool, it passes in context so I don't have to reselect every time. I'm going to call it test virtual disk, click next. And one of the things that storage has done in this release is that the subsystem tells the user interface, the UI, what capabilities are available. So you are only presented with options throughout the wizard that are actually supported by the underlying subsystem. So we're making it really easy for you to go through that whole process. So I'm going to click mirror. I'm going to click I've got more than 3 drives, so I get some additional settings on here, whereas if I had only picked 2 or 3 drives, I wouldn't have gotten these settings around resiliency, provisioning settings.
Ooh, do thin provisioning.
I know, this is another one of my top features. So thin provisioning allows you to actually provision the drive to be greater than the physical space.
So the physical drive is 490...
5 gigabytes.
Gigabytes. But you're just doing that. Oh, was that?
I'm doing 1,000.
1,000 gigabytes. No, add another 0. Can you do that?
10,000 gigabytes.
Yeah.
All right.
Why not?
So what that does is if you have applications that,
if you're going to lie,
in software,
lie big.
people lie, right? And it's a little bit. So if you have an application that says it requires more disk space than it actually does, then you can provision a drive greater than what you have on the physical drive, but it'll only use what's actually physically there.
That's an architect's joke. Virtualization is another word for lying.
All right, we're going to go ahead and create that. And then again, it'll link me into that next step, which is around creating a volume. And so I'm going to close, and it'll chain me in. You can see this. I'm not going to go through all the rest of the steps, but we're really guiding the user through that task-based experience.
By the way, this is really important because what we're doing in storage, there's just so many rich functions in storage, and yet you see how simple we've made them so that you can easily access those new functions. So now this one deserves, this is not a pity applause. That's pretty...
All right. So I walked you through the task-based approach, but let's actually, you were having a problem the other day.
What? Okay, at the end of this one, we humiliate them, okay? Just
so
get
you were
ready.
having a problem the other day,
yeah,
right?
I tried to save my
your expense report. Okay, so Jeffrey's trying to save his expense report. He's actually, it's on a server that I don't normally manage, so I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to, no, it's not going to. I'm going to find that server. It was on demo 5. All right, so I'm going to add that into what I can manage. And you'll see it goes out, it discovers that, and there are actually some shared folders that exist out on that on that server. So it's going to automatically go out, discover those, pull those in.
Oh, wait, look at the percent allocated. That's what that thin provisioning did. Was it 1,000 gigabytes?
And so it's going to come back. It rediscovered
10,000.
that machine, and it sees that there are some shares now available out there. So I now have access to shares. I didn't clear my demo from the last time, so let's just filter that. Again, I have a bunch of shares. You were having a problem with your expense report.
Yes, I
right?
was.
So if I start to type in, again, it filters. I get this expense report. How big was the file?
It was small, a couple K.
All right, so there's, there's a quota on there, but there's a couple megabytes of free disk space, so I don't think that's the problem.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the permissions. So here, I'm going to click on Properties, Permissions. There you are, Jeffrey. You only have read access, so that's the problem. So here you can see a simple troubleshooting scenario where we've brought a bunch of information together. We've made it really easy to access that information. We've visually, if I cancel out of this, shown you the allocation to see, so that you can see there aren't issues with respect to quotas or the accounts. So really brought this into one view so that you can easily troubleshoot and diagnose issues in your environment.
Now, I guarantee you that's way cooler than anything they're showing in that room. So let's have it. Whoa!
All right.
You guys rock.
I got one last thing, which I actually
They're all
think
like, oh,
may
dang.
warrant a huge amount of applause. Okay, so we all know, I showed you Server Manager. It's a rich client. It's installed on your Windows 8 client machine. It helps you manage your servers remotely. But you're not always in front of a machine where you've installed RSAT. And so you want to be able to access and manage from anywhere. You're at, the family on the weekend, you're at the in-laws, and you want to manage, something goes wrong with the server, you want to connect it. Well, before, we really didn't have a solution. Now, we have PowerShell Web Access. So PowerShell Web Access is essentially the ability to connect and get a PowerShell session in a browser. So it's a gateway machine. I authenticate to that gateway, and then I can connect to any machine in my environment. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to log on as the administrator. Here, I'm going to connect to Rope Computer, and it's going to give me a fully functioning PowerShell console when it authenticates.
And so what browsers will this work on, or what machines?
It'll work.
Woo! Woo!
So it'll actually work on any browser that supports JavaScript and cookies.
Yeah.
All right, what can I do in here? I can get process, typical things. It comes back in a very familiar. I get tab completion. So I can do, get service. So very consistent experience, access to all of your familiar PowerShell. But wait, this gets better. So I'm going to sign out of here. So there's always those scenarios where you want to give someone access to do a subset of the commands, but you don't want to make them an administrator, and you don't want them to be able to do everything. So I've actually demoted Jeffrey. He's now
actually, you know what? This is cool. Some guy came up to me at the beginning of the session saying, "Hey, can you do it?" And this is what he was asking about.
All right. So I've demoted you. You're now the junior admin.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to try and log on as Jeffrey. And we're going to log on to that same machine.
Somehow you have my password. That's
I do.
interesting.
I'm the Uber admin, so, I'm going to sign in, and it's going to give me an error message. You don't have permission to do this. All right, so I have created a different endpoint. So down in this optional configuration setting, I can give it a different configuration name of the endpoint that I want to connect to. So I've created an endpoint called Junior Admin, and I'm going to let Jeffrey connect to that. Sign in. He gets the PowerShell window. He's partying on.
Ooh,
he wants to get the Windows feature installed. Oh, no, sorry.
What's up with that?
All right, well, let's do a get command. as you can see, I no longer have those 2,400 commands. I have a subset of commands. So Jeffrey's allowed to get processes, to get services, to get help, but he can't go ahead and do things that I think are damaging to the environment. So if you think this is cool, go to that session I talked about on Friday, the deep dive into the automation, advanced automation, because Mira and Dan are going to show you how this is done in the back end.
Great.
So cool.
Yeah. So I encourage you to go to that session because it's actually even cooler. You can set it up so that, in fact, I cannot be an admin.
You weren't an admin on this box.
I wasn't an admin.
No.
So what happens is she set up that environment with just those commands, and when I come in, those commands run as administrator. Okay? So that's delegated administration. Really powerful stuff. All right. So again, this is the session we mentioned.
This is actually a new session. This is a session Ian's doing, and it will deep dive into Server Manager. So if you want to know more of the tips and tricks of how you customize that environment, how it scales, how you can add in up to over 100 machines, please attend Ian's session.
Yeah, great stuff there. Okay, so we know that IT pros manage both servers and clients, and that they use both machines. And so we have exactly one shell for Windows, and so when we've updated the shell on the client, the server inherits that as well, because we have a consistent experience. We would deliver a consistent experience across these environments. Now, Server Manager, of course, is a consistent experience for managing the server, and you can do that on the server or remotely. And we now have something, are we going to talk about this? Yes,
yeah,
and it's exactly the same Server Manager, whether it's local or remote. And there's something Aaron referred to RSAT. That stands for the Remote Server Administration Toolkit, which is a download, and I don't know if you mentioned, but for the first time ever, we're releasing RSAT simultaneously with the release of the OS. So you want to get that. Now, we have new deployment options. Now, with this release, Server Core is the preferred configuration option. Now, I know in the past people have tried to use Server Core, and it has been difficult. And there was a few reasons for that, and the answer is we address those reasons, and we now feel confident that you can succeed using Server Core. Now, there are things you're going to have to learn and new workflows, and if you want to keep running the GUI, that's great. Just run the GUI from the client to manage Server Core machines. So that's what RSAT's about. Now, why do we feel that we you can succeed with this? And the first and most important, of course, is the great increase in PowerShell coverage. Again, when you could only do 230 things, there were so many things that you ended up having to script. It was very difficult to succeed in that environment. And now we have full coverage for most everything, so we're confident with that. Next is there were a set of roles which were not available in the past. And now we've increased the number of roles that are available on Server Core, and the next version of SQL Server will run on Server Core. So that's great stuff. And again, I mentioned earlier, the reason why Server Core is so important is when people have deployed Server Core, they've had 50 to 70% fewer critical patches. That is huge. Okay. Now, in between Server Core and Server with a GUI is a midpoint, and that's called the Minimal Server Interface. And what this does is it provides you many of the benefits of Server Core, it provides many of the benefits of Server Core for those applications or users that can't make the full transition. And so what it is it's Server with a GUI, where the Metro Shell and Internet Explorer have been taken away, so you can still run MMC, you can still run the new glorious Server Manager, you can still run Control Panel Applets, but you don't have IE and you don't have the Metro Shell. So again, the surface area is much reduced. Okay? And the benefit now is that you can go between these environments. You can go and say, hey, we found that a number of third-party applications require the GUI for installation and configuration, but that after you do that, you can remove the GUI and run them just fine. And so you can do that. You can now go from Server Core to full server, back to Server Core, or to minimal server interface. So with that,
so let's take a look at it. Okay, here I'm in Server Manager again. I have two different machines. I have Demo 1 and Demo 2. Demo 1 is running the full server or server with a GUI, and Demo 2 is running my minimum server interface. So from here I can right click and I can remote desktop just to speed things up. No tricks and mirrors here. I have actually created that connection already, so we don't have to wait for it to log on and authenticate. But here you can see this is a server machine running the full GUI. Server Manager comes up. We've done a couple of things to really make this what we think optimized for the IT Pro environment. That is, we don't boot to the start screen. We actually boot to the desktop. We bring Server Manager up by default. From within Server Manager, you'll see this cool Tools menu. That brings up all your administrative tools that you typically have in the Admin Tools folder. So easy to access that.
Think of that as the start menu for admins. They don't get it, but you do.
But you do have the full Metro experience. So if I go into the lower right-hand corner, I'll get the Charms menu. I can bring up settings. From there, I can do things like shut down the computer, restart, etc. If I come back, I'll go into the lower left corner. We can hit the start screen. Again, we've optimized the start screen and pinned things to it that we think are important that IT pros are going to go access. Things like PowerShell, Server Manager, Task Manager, Print Management, etc. Just for those of you who are unfamiliar with this experience, a couple of interesting things. If I click on the name of the person logged on, that's where I can lock or sign out the machine. If I just start typing in this window, it'll actually search. Exciting, I can actually back up and it'll give me all the apps on the server. But let's go back to that admin folder. So here's the admin tools. If I right click on it, I get some handy things down at the bottom. I can pin it to start. I can pin it to the taskbar on my desktop. I can run it as administrator. I can run it as a different user. So handy things that you will use within the sort of full server experience. So with that, I'm going to actually switch over to Demo 2, and you'll see that here it looks almost similar because I've got Server Manager up and running. But if I minimize this down, there's nothing there. I just have a command window. I have no Internet Explorer. I have none of the Windows Explorer. But I can do things like run Server Manager, and I can do things like run MMC console. So I can launch the computer management snap-in, and it runs. So all of your GUI tools run on Min Server, but you don't have IE, and you don't have the Windows Explorer experience. So good stepping stone if you want to move towards Server Core, but aren't willing to make that full leap.
And there's no IE patches.
But as Jeffrey said, it's really easy to actually move between them. So here I am on a Min Shell box or minimal server interface box. I'm going to go through. I'm going to select the server. I'm going to go to features. And if I scroll down, scrolled too far.
User, yeah. It's grayed out.
Oh, it's grayed out. That's why I'm not seeing it. The user interfaces and infrastructure is installed. You can see that the graphical management tools and infrastructure is already selected. That's the minimal server interface. If I wanted to bring this up to full server with a GUI, I would just add in the graphical shell, continue through the wizard. It would install those pieces, reboot, and I'd be back up to full server.
If you want to go to Server Core?
And if I want to go to Server Core, I would have had to use the remove wizard to remove the graphical management tools and infrastructure. And that would have taken me down to Server Core. I can do this locally. I can do it remotely through Server Manager, so I can move between very easily without having to reinstall.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right. So you can hear more about this. We have Deploying Windows Server 2012, Bare Metal, Server Core, Minimal Server Interface, and more. Really fun session. Goes into lots of the details. Okay. So again, everything that you've seen today starts from this basic premise. The basic premise is that we've changed our identity. We've changed who we are and what problems we're trying to solve. We are now trying to be a cloud OS, a great OS for lots of servers and the devices that connect those servers, whether they're physical, virtual, on-premises are off. So that means the servers, the networking, the storage, everything necessary to bring a data center as a compute platform. In order to do that, in order to achieve this vast mission, we've had to change our focus on management. We've had to really embrace standards-based management. This is how we're going to produce that data center HAL. By leveling the playing field, by being honest brokers, by first being a first-class citizen so that other people can manage us. You can fully manage Windows from Linux. We're not asking people to do something that we're not doing as well. So we fully support standards. You saw in the keynote, we're helping them implement standards by having a WMI-compatible open source implementation of these standards that we're freely licensing and making available through the community so they can embed it in their switches and storage arrays, etc. So big hug to standards-based management. But then we want to be able to automate things. We want to have robust automation. We want to make it simple and easy to automate things, to produce the automation. That's why we drove the changes we made in PowerShell. We want to increase the number of servers per admin so that you can manage large quantities of systems with your existing staff. And we want to be able to deal with the messy world, right? The world's messy, and we want to be able to empower you to deal with that and succeed. And lastly, we have the new, rich, and beautiful multi-machine management experience. That is our center. Everything's around multi-machine management. We've optimized this for remote management. Start from the client, manage those remote servers, available through the Remote Server Administration Toolkit. We have ISC, which makes it simple now to onboard and learn PowerShell. And lastly, we have the PowerShell Web Access. So you'll see each one of these themes. You'll see it throughout the talks this week. Just really exciting period, both for the industry and Windows. I think you'd have to agree. This is by far one of the most impactful, large, feature-rich releases we've ever had. But that shouldn't scare you. It shouldn't scare you. When you hear about all these features, just remember that we've invested to try and make it easy for you to adopt and exploit those features in a simple way, like Aaron was showing. This incredible investment in the storage stack, and now it's very simple to adopt and use. So with that, we've got a number of breakout sessions, lots of hands-on labs, and we got those guys, we're going to get them, okay? So that's it. And we do listen to all the evaluation forms. We read the comments. Please give us feedback. And now let's embarrass those guys. Woo! 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 Thank you so much. We are jet lagged, and your energy really made this work for us. So thank you so much.
We're at
Enjoy.
time, but Jeffrey and I will hang about here. If you have questions, please come talk to us. Or we have a lot of members at the booth, so come see us at the PowerShell and Server Manager booth.
Cheers.